Hello, I'm Alice Hiller, bringing you the Bird of Winter podcast series. The podcasts explore ways to be playful and adventurous with language, while keeping safe if you work with difficult materials, like I do. A word of warning. This episode mentions sexual abuse briefly, in the context of living beyond this crime as a teenager. What I'm going to explore today is finding words to hold things which can be hard to say, because they exist in the gaps and shadows of our lives. To do this, I'm going to talk about the title poem of my collection. It centres around meetings with a psychiatrist who admitted me to hospital in 1977 when I was 13. I'd stopped eating after being subjected to sexual abuse and needed treatment for anorexia. When I look back, our conversations bring together silence and speaking, through the body as well as with words. In 1977, sexual abuse in childhood wasn't widely recognised or discussed. There was no framework for me to say or even think about what my abuser had done. Aged 13, I weighed 28.5 kilograms or 4.5 stone. That's the average weight for an 8 or 9-year-old. Seeing me, the psychiatrist understood that something had gone very wrong. She began the process of turning my life around by giving me appropriate care. I needed Bird of Winter to communicate her care, but also my experience of not being able to communicate fully with her, and the vulnerability that arose from this. I also wanted to record what it feels like if your home is not a safe place to live in, when you haven't yet finished growing up, something many people face for various reasons. After trying out different approaches, I ended up setting short comments and questions from the psychiatrist down one side of the page. I butted these into silent, unspoken thoughts from my teenage self, taking up the second half of the line. Because we were connected to each other within the therapeutic process, I then moulded our shared lines into an oval or pill shape that held our exchanges in its single, joined space. The pill made a record on the page of how talking was a key part of the treatment. It also registered how I couldn't really speak at the time, partly due to the drugs that were prescribed to help me eat and sleep. The voice of the poem is fairly flat, almost muffled, suggesting how the drugs numbed me while I was in hospital. Bird of Winter. How are you today? This morning I find a chaffinch. I hear you're eating. No chirrups come from its swollen beak. You're sleeping okay? The chaffinch's beak is almost as long as its body. Have you enjoyed the books I brought in? The beak is reddish in colour. You're 13, you must grow up. Although the chaffinch keeps and separate from your mother, fluttering onto the curtain rail. You can't live at home. It is not strong enough to fly. Bird of Winter is also a poem about healing. Seen another way, the oval looks like an egg. This extra layer of meaning matters. It reflects how being in hospital put a safe shell around me. Inside this shell, I could start to recover and grow beyond the abuse. The new Alice hatches out in the poems about my teenage and then adult selves in Bird of Winter. The photo I chose for this podcast is of a gull flying alongside the cross-channel ferry to Dieppe. The way the bird stays close to the boat, while remaining free to tilt its wings and lift with the wind, or dive down into the green waves, made me think of how a teenager will progressively claim their independence until they are strong enough and confident enough to take to the skies of their adult life. Unlike the 1970s, there are now positive options in the UK for young people who've been subjected to sexual abuse to help them recover and feel strong and well. Support is also there for people seeking help in later life, as I did. The Mind website has valuable links and phone numbers, and your doctor can give you advice. If you'd like to try writing something of your own, based on how I put this poem together, I've created a 3-stage writing exercise, which will come after this. Otherwise, thanks for listening. I'm Alice Hiller, speaking about my collection Bird of Winter, which is published by Pavilion Poetry. I really appreciate you checking in with this project. To try out the approach I worked with for Bird of Winter, start by choosing your own subject. If it's something that might be tricky, plan how to stay emotionally safe. You could think about giving yourself a break after the first step, or working alongside a friend. When you're ready with something to write on, the first stage will be to set a timer for 3 minutes and let your mind go to your subject, after listening to the rest of the instructions for this stage. When the timer is running, quickly jot down images and phrases that come to you on the left-hand side of the page. Don't think too much, just let the words arrive. Pause the podcast while you do this. Start it again when you're done, or put the page away and come back to the project later if that feels better. The second step will be to think about how you felt, or maybe didn't feel, in the moment or experience you've chosen. As a teenager, I often found my own feelings hard to reach, which is part of the point of the poem. You'll need to take another 3 minutes for this stage. You might experience your reactions through visual images like my chaffinch, or other sorts of sequences, rather than just straightforward memories. Whatever comes up is good. Jot these feeling or not feeling phrases down the right-hand side of your page, facing the list you've already written. Pause the podcast again to do this and set your timer for 3 minutes, but remember to stop if it feels uncomfortable. As I said before, you can always come back another time. Press play again when you're ready for the final part of the exercise. You should now have 2 separate columns of words and phrases. One will be around the event or experience itself, the other around your feelings or not feelings. The third stage is to experiment playfully with different ways of bringing the lists together. There's no time limit here. You could cut up the individual sentences and move them around to change their order, or pick out phrases from each list and try writing them down, mixed in with each other. This story doesn't have to make logical sense. Life doesn't always add up in straightforward ways. Also, try different shapes for laying your phrases out on the page, like my pill that becomes an egg. Slowly, you'll start to feel something emerging that's all your own. You can repeat the first 2 stages again, so you get more images and phrases to play and experiment with. When our material is difficult, getting in and out quickly can be really good, at a creative and a personal level. It keeps everything fresh and shows that this time around you're in charge and taking good care of yourself. I often work on something for weeks, months, or even years, putting together a draft, then leaving it for a while before coming back. This stops me feeling overwhelmed and also lets new ideas come in from things I see, hear, and even dream. I also find speaking into my phone useful sometimes, rather than only writing things down. You might want to try both ways. Good luck with your art making. I'm Alice Hiller. Thanks again for listening.